Welcome to Hive Mind. This is Edge with my co-host Speaker. How you feeling today, Speaker?
I'm not too bad. I've been better, but I got a couple hours sleep there, so I'm ready to get on with this. This is something
Nice.
that's close to me, so
Yeah, it's close to me too. We're going to talk about the destruction of masculinity today. I'm doing all right. It's been actually really weird raising boys in this world because, I want them to grow up to be good men, and by the standards of today's society, that definition is totally changing, and it's confusing for boys and young men right now. So I think it's important to me, and that's why I'm, passionate about talking about this, the war on masculinity.
that's definitely why I wanted to do this with you involved as well, because there is two camps that I think really get affected by this on a personal level. One, it's men, adult fathers in general, seeing this sort of stuff happen to their kids, or seeing their kids' heads get filled with this, well, propaganda. It is a way to emasculate them. And another camp is mothers with sons or women with brothers. They're generally the camps that are like, that can see through this shit and can see through this war, and they have a strong stance against it too. And so some of these instances we're going to get in today. But
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely two sides as far as like viewpoints as well. I mean, people see this as progressive and enlightened, and other people see this as totally regressive and a crumbling of some of the foundations of our societies. So I'm definitely in that second camp. The destruction of masculinity, I do not believe is in any way good for our society, but I
no,
think we'll
no, it is not.
yeah, I think we're in agreement here, and probably all of our listeners will be as well. But so this isn't something that just happened overnight. The attack of masculinity, the patriarchy, that's been going on for decades. It seems in recent years it's been amplified, and it's just been put in overdrive, don't you think?
Yeah, tenfold, tenfold. But it's not just the destruction of masculinity. It's the destruction of, like you said, the patriarchy, and we're seeing that with this wave, this fourth wave of feminism, which is not about feminism. It's not about equality. First wave feminism was, and they did an amazing job. But this fourth wave feminism is not about equality. It's about, in my personal opinion, about control.
Yeah, it definitely isn't about empowering women. I mean, this whole movement that started out as empowering women years ago, now it's something entirely different. It's not about uplifting women as much as it's really about attacking and eliminating masculinity.
100%.
And, I think that we should talk about this definition of toxic masculinity that's deemed to be so dangerous. And I found this really interesting because, the school of psychology actually has a definition. Go down to what is toxic masculinity.
First, I want to
Yeah, scroll down just a little bit.
see this photo first. Your prime example of toxic masculinity right there.
Yeah.
Let's go, Dad.
Yeah, so a study in the Journal of School of Psychology uses the following definition to explain toxic masculinity. Quote, the constellation of socially regressive masculine traits that serve to foster domination, the devaluation of women, homophobia, and wanton violence. Harmful concepts of masculinity are as follows: strength, lack of emotion, self sufficiency, dominance, sexual virility. I don't know about you, but just looking at those traits, none of them inherently are harmful. I don't believe that at all. And when they're put in the right context, they're actually a good thing. Like we want men to be strong. Personally, I I believe that. Lack of emotion, I can see how it could be a negative thing if there was like no emotion ever. But then on the flip side, you don't want men who are hyper emotional
Emotional. Yeah.
either. And self sufficiency is a good thing. That is not a harmful trait. Dominance, I can understand how that can be both a positive or a negative. You want to dominate on the sports, on
Mm.
your in sports, and you want to dominate in business or
But
in
but you want but you
warfare.
but you want to dominate in life. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
a man looks at, so this is just coming from my own personal view here, right? A man wants to, when you're picking out these traits, uh, how I feel about things is I want to dominate everything I do. Now that doesn't mean I want to become a tyrant over everything I do. There's very different things, but I want the sense of knowing that, I've dominated a field that I've been in, either a competitive field or a business field or anything like that. But I want to feel like that I have taken it on to my full capacity.
Right. I mean, how would anybody reach to such heights of, such achievements without having that desire?
Mm.
Like, climbing the tops of mountains, for example, Mount Everest would never have been conquered if there wasn't that desire, that trait, to succeed, to dominate in that area. Whatever it is, it's not always a bad trait. It can be if used in the wrong context. I mean, like dominance in personal relationships could be harmful in some
Of course,
ways,
yeah.
but they're only focusing on that. But then they're saying these strengths or these I'm sorry these characteristics can lead to anything from bullying to domestic violence, sexual assault. Um, yeah, I just want to know if you ask me, I say, why the hell aren't we uplifting and supporting the positive
Aspects,
roles of
yeah.
masculine men
Well,
that have some of these
100%.
traits?
There is no movement for men like you see from a feminist movement. There is no movement that is there to uplift men and young boys, and that's why I put Jordan Peterson in here, because with a lot of his talks, he empowers men, and that's another reason why he's attacked so much and he's labeled alt right. Is most of his listeners are men, and for the reason that a lot of his students have come to him and said to him, I've never had this in my life. I've never had someone like talk to me that like I was capable and that I was worthy and of just being me. And he changed a lot of people's lives through that. Now, a lot of these traits I don't really consider just particularly a male thing. I mean, I've met plenty of women that try to insert dominance in every way, shape, or form. I've met plenty of women that completely lack emotion, right? So I don't think these are all inherently manly traits. But saying that, looking at these concepts and my concepts of masculinity, of what I've seen over the years, are you still there?
Yeah,
Really?
I'm here.
Oh, sorry, I thought I lost you. Um, of what I've seen over the years, and I'll give you some examples of that. One of my best friends, he, I've got a couple of friends, and I'll mention them through their traits and how I've actually learned things from them as well. Um, one of my best friends that I've been friends with since probably year nine. He is your typical concept of a strong, manly man that you might be afraid to approach, just because of his physical prowess, or the way he carries himself, which is a sense of dominance. But under that, he has never harmed anyone or never gone out of his way to attack anyone that he didn't feel cornered, or that he had to defend himself from. He was he is the nicest person to the most random people, from the people that and this is how you can really tell a good person, when he he talks to cleaners or he talks to people like that, or he'll treat anyone in the service industry like a person. And he's completely an emotional wreck sometimes when it comes to certain things, especially towards his daughter. Right, so like things like that, and that is what I conceive to be a masculine man, is a person that can show emotion when they have to show emotion, right?
Right.
That can be strong when they need to be strong, and can be dominant when they need to be dominant, because sometimes in situations that men get put in, whether it's fights or anything like that, which it does occur. You know what I mean? This is the thing that I can put down to nature. It's always happened. I've got into plenty of fights when I was a kid. I lost half, I won half. Uh, but he shows this sort of emotion and love and caring, and it comes off very much like a lion, and that is what I think men should strive to be. He utmost love for his wife, utmost love for his kids, and incredible emotional towards them. But if you were to back him in the corner, or if you were to uh, attack any of those things, you better move out of the way. Like,
Right. Right. Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Like the masculinity in itself is not a bad thing. And it seems like we're throwing everything out in this progressive society. Like all masculinity is toxic. It leads to all of these bad things, bullying, domestic violence, sexual assault. Let's not talk about how these traits are used for good, the altruism, the protection, the sense of justice, and those types of things, how it can be used in forces for good. We can't ever talk about that, and that is what we are seriously lacking. We need the fathers, we need the protectors, we need the leaders in this world today more than ever.
Yeah, so like when you see or when you hear about things such as abuse, which it does happen in society, and unfortunately it does happen, especially sexual abuse and stuff like that, is predominantly perpetrated by males. That's just a fact in society. It is just how it is. But I don't see people that do those things, and kind of what we're looking down here, the wounded masculine, perpetrator, abuse of power. I don't think dominance should be there. Aggression, control, competitive. I don't think some of these things should be there, but some certainly should. Abuse, stuff like that, unstable, definitely. Um, Confrontational, I still wouldn't put that there either. So there's nuances to certain things there, but like for when I hear about a person that is abusive, either verbally, physically, mentally, and especially sexually, I don't link those things to masculinity at all. I link those things in a man to demasculinity, because only a weak man will abuse someone weaker than him. Only a weak man will abuse his power in any sense of the word, and only a weak man will abuse his kids or try to control and dominate them.
Good point. Good point.
I don't consider these things masculine traits.
Yeah. And when it comes to masculinity and the positive roles of masculine men. The most important, I believe, is fathers. I mean, we have a serious crisis on our hands with young boys and men lacking positive male role models. And I know that you showed something to me, which I didn't really know much about. The boys that were forced to give up their masculinity or something. Tell me
Well,
about that.
well, it's pretty close. Well, a lot of things have been going on in Australia at the moment. A lot of sexual harassment claims coming out of Parliament and things like that. A lot of these things wouldn't surprise me, especially in positions of power. Um, but you also got to look at the other factor of that. I don't put this straightly on men. I put this as in a toxic hierarchy situation where people use each other. But there is definitely some cases there where you're like, yeah, okay, this has happened, this is bad. But because of this, that has been going around Australia lately, a school, and I'm not sure exactly where it's located, but a school somewhere in Australia had a general assembly, and they made every boy in the school stand up and apologize for being a boy.
That's ridiculous.
Now, this got back to some independent journalists because parents were furious about it. Absolutely furious about it, especially mothers. Most of the people that were calling up were mothers, right? Saying, my child's not a rapist. My child's not this. Why is he? And these are 12, 13-year-old kids, right?
Wow.
And yeah, it just went viral. And of course, principal of the school said, we could have handled this better. It was meant in good faith. But attacking a gender, and we've talked about this plenty of times, and anyone that has eyes can see it, collective guilt is very dangerous.
Right. Right. Assuming the um the responsibility for something that you had nothing to do with simply because you're part in some way identified as being the same gender or the same color or the same sexuality, whatever it is. But then you have to then assume guilt and shame for something that somebody else did just because you're lumped into that group.
Hmm.
It's insane. And we're seeing that a lot, of course, lately with the whole attack on white people, whiteness, and you have to, in order to not be racist now, you have to disown your whiteness.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's just this self-hate for whatever you are. It's just really destructive.
Self hate in just is such an insidious thing because you cannot live a life that you're meant to live, or you cannot live a life where you thrive if you hate who you are. You can't
Right.
you can't break that shell because you're always fighting with your own inner demons. I mean, uh, one thing I've always stuck by and always learned is you cannot love anyone else or the world if you do not love yourself first in any way, shape, or form.
So true. So true. And we learn a lot of these things from our childhood, from our families. And I want to get back to talking about the role of fathers and how important that is. So if you go to the next tab over the boy crisis, because Warren Farrell, he's spent his whole career studying this and cited numerous studies about it, about how the lack of a positive father figure leads to major problems for young boys. And that's really what we need to be focusing on is is uplifting positive male role models, masculinity in these roles for young boys. Because, boys that are lacking father figures, there's statistics after statistics, studies after studies showing everything from lower grades in school to addiction, suicide, crime. I mean, the statistics are undeniable about how important the role of fathers are for raising boys. And by the time, here's just an example, by the time they reach their teen years, boys without fathers are 6 times more likely than girls without fathers to commit suicide. So that just shows you how important the role of fathers are, and strong father figures, positive father figures. But in this age of women empowerment, where the roles of fathers are just being pushed to the side and marginalized, and there's a lot of single households, many a times with the mothers raising the boys, fathers are left thinking, do they really even need me? Or am I just toxic for them? And young boys are left thinking and feeling this sort of purpose void where they're like, all these role models of warriors, leaders, providers, protectors, those are now all toxic. So what can I actually aspire to be that's not toxic, right? There's this void and it's getting filled with something else. And that's the problem that we're facing here. So, I mean, really, in my opinion, it's more about uplifting these positive masculine role models.
one hundred percent.
And in
I mean,
every way.
that's why I brought up Jordan Peterson. But of course, he's attacked by his own thing. Now, there's certain things, especially in my life. I mean, in my journey, my father was very emotional, very compassionate, but not completely to the way that it uh, he didn't show me other aspects or didn't teach me other aspects as well. It was just the sort of person that he is. Um, and I learned great value from some of the things he taught me, especially when it came to the emotional side and the compassionate side. But as I got older, I did feel like I needed other role models. I felt like I was missing certain things, and no one's perfect, right? Like I had a great childhood. Like there was certain toxic things about it, but not to the point where it broke me mentally or anything like that. Um, but I had to learn different skills from other places, and some of those places. I mean, Elliot Hughes was a person that helped me heaps in my early 20s, I'd say. He's been making movies for a long time, but he helped me really connect to my own inner strength and really helped me bring out my masculinity side. That's why I have him up here, and of course, it's another reason why he gets a lot of hate. Jacko Wilkinson is another one. His podcast is really really great, and these guys, yes, they look like your typical what you'd expect from typical men, but then you have Jordan Peterson, who is the opposite, but he's a masculine man. It's you don't need to look like people like Elliot Hughes or Jack Wilson or stuff like that to have masculine traits or to be a masculine human being.
Right, or to support and uplift men and
Of course
not
not.
demonize masculinity.
Of
Yeah.
course not. Like
And when you talk about, go ahead.
I was going to say, like my core group of friends, ever since I had growing up, there was about 16, 17 of us. There was a lot of us actually, and we're very, very tight uh, group of people, and we have been since high school. And a lot of them are fathers now. I'd say the majority of them are fathers now. But the thing that was very unique about our group is we had our people in our group that looked like Elliot Hughes. Do you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
we had people in our group that looked like Jordan Peterson. I mean, one of my friends in that group, complete computer nerd, amazing what he did, but he fit in perfectly with the rest of us because he owned his masculinity through the traits that he had and through other aspects. When it came to dominance in his field, he was amazing at it. He might not have had the physical strength, but that didn't make him any less of a man. And that's what made our group very unique, and outsiders kind of looked at it as like, well, what's this is really strange. Right? I mean,
Right.
we had accountants, and we had computer nerds, and we had fighters, and it was just this real weird bunch of people. But when I kind of like I did an analysis of our group, and I kind of looked at it as a whole, and I came to the conclusion that this whole group, doesn't matter how it was portrayed or how it looked, were all very self-sufficient, masculine, dominant men in their own way. They were all alphas in their own way.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the problem, I think, with identity politics, because it tries to make a whole group of diverse people all into this one, monolithic thing. And it discounts the diversity. It discounts like the progressive left's so interested in diversity, but really what it seems to me is that they're trying to like conglomerate and like make everybody the same.
Mm.
And within their identity, whatever they identify as, and that just discounts the individuality, right?
Well,
And
100%. And with my group of friends again, I mean, this group was completely multiracial. We had Kiwis, we had Mauritians. It was completely a multiracial group, but that wasn't a factor. It never has been a factor.
right. And when you talk about just for a second here, talking about some of the positive traits of masculinity, and I don't see strength or dominance as being necessarily harmful or toxic.
Definitely
And
not.
especially when you're looking at the military, because, you know, when we look at the military, they're on the front line. They're the protectors of our nation. And right now we, of course, have this administration that they're focused on recruiting transgender people into the military, providing them with taxpayer funded sex reassignments, requiring gender sensitivity training for their members, lowering the standards for females in basic training. I mean, all these initiatives are aimed at demasculating our military, which to them it's just so progressive and enlightened and there's equity, but really, it's just demasculating our military and it's weakening, confusing, and dividing them, in my opinion.
Yeah, wish I had this video up, but I dropped it in our group chat a while back, and it's a video of the Chinese military ad for people to join the Chinese military, and the contrast between that and the ads that you're getting out of the West now to come join the military it's night and day. I mean, the Chinese tapped into their warrior heritage, going back to the time of the Three Kingdoms and ancient Chinese warfare, and incorporated that with their modern day soldiers marching. And it was actually a really good military video. As much as I dislike China, I can see what they did there, and uh, it did reminate strength.
Right, right.
Even though
Meanwhile, we're over
it's
here.
communist control and it's obviously propaganda, but it still permeated a strong united front.
Yeah, I can assure you that our enemies are not supporting these same initiatives that we are in the armed forces. That's for sure.
Definitely not.
We're intentionally, purposely weakening our military with this agenda, and and it's dangerous. It's
It is.
dangerous.
It is going to be a problem in the future because military is like it's almost like there hasn't been any real confrontation in so long that the military now has just become this whole branch of either kids from liberal colleges or something like that joining the military to get an easy paycheck and
Right.
to put to push their agendas and stuff like that. Have never seen a war zone. Um, and then you have other countries that uh, realize that the military is there for two real reasons. One, to protect its nation and all its citizens in any way, shape, or form, or two, to fight and eliminate an enemy if need be.
Right.
Right? This is what a military force does and always has done throughout history. Right? A military force is not there to stand on a podium and talk about gender neutrality.
Yeah, so there are very serious consequences to this war on masculinity that are even affecting our military, the primary force that protects your country.
Mm.
So
And
yeah,
this got nothing to do with women in the military, right? This is not what we're talking about here.
no, but
It's
again,
showing that certain traits,
no, it's no longer about empowering and uplifting women. It's about demasculating
men.
men, and that's the problem. So, this is obviously seeped into the fashion industry, social media, Hollywood, mainstream. They're all pushing this agenda to feminize men because it's not enough to support women. Masculinity is now toxic. So, men are pressured into rejecting their own masculinity. Otherwise, you're a misogynist. It's just like if it's not enough to support and uplift people of color, you have to now reject your own whiteness. Otherwise, you're a racist or you get canceled, right?
100%.
Yeah, so now we have men dressing like women in support of women's empowerment and rejecting their toxic masculinity, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's just never enough. Look at these clothes. I mean, some of these ensembles, they actually look like schoolgirls,
Hmm.
young schoolgirls. I mean, what does that tell you? There's a lot psychologically going on there, and then none of it's good.
Oh yeah, 100%. You don't expect anything less from the fashion industry.
Yeah, I understand they're always trying to push the envelope, yada yada, be the at the forefront and pushing uh, that onto the psyche of the people, and it's progressivism. It's pushing the people in a certain direction, and
Fashion.
Hollywood and mainstream media, and they're all in on that, pushing that agenda.
Oh yeah, fashion. The fashion industry serves multiple purposes, and one of those purposes is psychological warfare, and of course the other is money laundering, which is not apparent, apparent to this conversation. But psychological warfare on a populace is a big part of the fashion industry as well.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. And Hollywood, same thing.
Of
They
course,
use the
I mean,
stars to push their agendas. And right now it's definitely a huge, huge push to demasculate men. And if you show masculine traits, then you're toxic. And if you don't disown those masculine traits, then you're a misogynist. It's just so extreme.
yeah, and like a real masculine man, once they get told that, would just kind of smirk and laugh and walk off.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
They would not be threatened by someone saying that if you have masculine traits, you're a misogynist.
But
That's
think about young boys, think about teen
that's
boys
the issue.
on
That's
social media and the threats that they get. You know how you get ganged up on by the progressive mobs,
hmm
the cancel culture, and the pressure that's put on young boys and young men who are still working out their own identities um, to to conform to this extreme progressive agenda. Otherwise, they're canceled, you know? So,
I mean, psychologically, through any sort of youth, especially with children. I mean, if a boy was told he's a girl since he's 5, he's going to grow up with that psychological, um, oh, like huge issues. Do you know what I mean? Trying to, because he's been told he's been one thing his whole life. And that's what you're seeing now, I think, with a lot of these progressive families. There is no teaching of masculinity in its forms because the parents, the fathers, are not very masculine themselves.
yeah, yeah. And so there's just a lot of confusion. And like I said, what it leaves is a void because, the traditional roles that boys aspire to be, whether it's, the warrior, whether it's protector, whether it's the provider, whatever those roles are just being broken down. And so it's like nothing for boys to aspire to be that's socially acceptable anymore. And so it leaves this void. And I think just a lot of really confused young men and boys.
Mhm.
But I do want to get into the psychology of it because this is really interesting. There was a study done. It's called enclothed cognition. Yeah, it's on the next tab. So I know this sounds bizarre, but it's true. Um, there is a psychology behind the clothes that you wear. There's certain symbols that clothes have. Like dresses have a certain symbolism of femininity, and a suit and tie has a certain symbolism of masculinity. But they did this study here on clothing, in particular on the symbolism of a lab coat and how it affects the psyche. So when you think of, say, a lab coat, you think of someone who's wearing a lab coat as having certain characteristics or traits, like they're somehow involved in science or medicine, that they're smart,
Qualified in some way.
yeah, that they're smart, that they study hard, that they pay attention to detail, all that kind of stuff.
That's why I have my coat in the cupboard just for randomly when I go out and I want
Exactly.
to.
Just put it on so you can feel smart. Well, there's actually a psychology to this because
Yeah.
what they did was they studied regular people with just, different backgrounds, and they gave them different cognitive tests while wearing a lab coat versus not wearing a lab coat. And the interesting thing is that people performed better on these tests while they were wearing lab coats. meaning the symbolism of the lab coats actually affected their psyche, and they were paying more attention to detail. They were paying attention for longer periods of time, that sort of a thing.
Hmm.
But so if you take this psychology of what the symbolism of certain clothes mean, and how that affects your psyche, what does that actually say about men dressing like schoolgirls,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, this is definitely trying to change the psyche of men, and not in a good way.
Definitely not a good way.
Mm,
But it's like the same when you
yeah.
see someone with glasses, right? That stereotype where you're like, well, they must be smart.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, so what's the net result of this war on masculinity? Well, it turns out that attacking, demonizing, and canceling the traits of men that men just inherently have, that's going to backfire and cause men to have, who have been completely cast out of this progressive society to overcompensate. Go to that next article. There are actually studies done about that. So, this whole war on masculinity, it's counterproductive. If this whole movement is about empowering women, stopping misogyny, stopping homophobia, that's not what's going to happen. It's actually going to have a counter effect because apparently, when masculinity is threatened, men tend to overcompensate and go the opposite direction. So there's actually an equal and opposite reaction to this war on masculinity that is entirely counterproductive. And really, instead of canceling masculinity, let's uplift and empower men to be strong role models as fathers, warriors, and leaders. And maybe people in the progressive left who are concerned about homophobia, misogyny, and empowering women, maybe they should just leave men the hell alone and let them be masculine. What do you think?
More than that, they should be thriving in society at the moment. Just
Yep.
as just as we want women to. It's not that we don't want. A strong masculine man wants a strong, loving, emotional female, right? That also mirrors same qualities, right? And I think, and I'm pretty sure, I'm certain on this, that a woman wants a man if she's that way inclined, not a boy, not someone that is juggling his masculinity in some way or wearing dresses. And if they do, well, then they're in a sort of a different psychological phase going on there. But men and women in general, you want a strong partner, and you
Yeah,
want
this
from a man. I want a female that exuberates feminine traits and that is also strong and compassionate and can uh, go toe to toe with me.
right. Listen, there's ways to empower and uplift both.
Of
It's
course.
but in this society and this progressive agenda, it's about it's not about uplifting women. It's about
Yeah,
attacking, demonizing, and canceling masculinity. I say uplift them all, you know, and we need strong men in important roles as fathers, as warriors, and as leaders.
definitely.
So,
So an example of when I was younger and I was trying to figure out how this world works, right? Especially with girls, when I was early high school, and I had to reassess some things that I was doing, and that's how I learned to be me in the end of the day. But uh, when and you see this a lot with men, especially at a young age, especially with young love and stuff like that. They don't know how to approach it, and they come off feminine. They don't realize that because they've never been taught that, or they've never had an older brother, or a proper father, and that woman will reject them, and then that kind of snowballs into certain things. But what I realized is, the people that showed masculine traits, they weren't afraid to go up and talk to a group of women. Do you know what I mean? And that's really hard for boys in general. Like, they don't understand, and they're like, that it kind of paralyzes them with fear. But when you see men and stuff that do that, and they don't care about the repercussions, and they'll just do it because they want to do it. Females like that sort of stuff, right? They like a person that's not scared, that's strong, that shows these traits of masculinity. And a lot of boys need to start learning that, because that I've seen it affect a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that having those positive male role models, especially in the father, figure position, are where boys learn it. And we're so lacking in that,
Yeah,
and
like
from a societal standpoint.
I was
And
I was very lucky, because I had an older brother. My father was a little bit older, and, like I said, a little bit more compassionate and emotional. But my older brother taught me how to deal with that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And so it became easy for me. But I saw, well, not easy for me. I still got messed around myself. All boys do, all girls do. It happens. It's life. But what I noticed is the person that didn't have those strong masculine figures in their life found juggling those days, especially early school days, hard.
yeah, definitely.
And they take that into adulthood.
Hmm. They do. That's what we need to be focused on. That's what
100%.
we need to uplifting strong male figures to be role models for the next generation of men, of good men, which we need desperately in this society. So, all right. I think we're ready to wrap it up. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, let's wrap it up. That was a good
All
talk.
right. Yeah, good talk. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us here today on Hive Mind. Please be sure to share this podcast. We are on YouTube, BitChute, Foxhold, and Pilled. You can find all of our platforms on our website in the description. And to our Patreon and PayPal supporters, we just want to thank you. We love you all. And we'll see you back next time right here on Hive Mind.